Welcome back. Back in March, one of the first schools to fully launch and implement virtual learning was East Harlem Scholars Academies. The leadership in the community-based academies made the decision to close their doors on Friday, March 13th, and they've continued remote teaching ever since. Joining us now to share more about her experience at East Harlem Scholars Academy this second is teacher Emma Sprecher. Emma, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. So to start, can you just tell us a little bit more about the academy that you work in, East Harlem Scholars Academy II, and what types of students you serve at that school?
East Harlem Scholars Academy is a state charter. It originally started in 1958 as a tutoring program to just boost academics in the community. As it grew, it turned into an after-school program that serviced mainly DOE schools. Then it sort of created its own network of schools. So we have two elementary schools. I work at the second one, Scholars Academy 2. We have two middle schools and we have one high school, which is actually in its first couple years of being in existence, which is awesome for a network that is growing within the community. Our network also has a huge emphasis on abolitionist teaching as a way to use their anti-racist practices to shed light on institutional racism and all the other isms that plague communities around our world and our country. And that sort of brings me into the students that we serve. So we mainly serve students of color from all different cultures and backgrounds that are in the East Harlem community. So that being said, that doesn't mean that all of them are from East Harlem, but the majority of our families come from East Harlem community. And if you walk anywhere in East Harlem community, you'll probably see one of our buildings because they're everywhere. One of them's really big and blue and you really can't miss it.
Thank you so much, Emma, for providing that background. And I wanted to ask, do charter schools operate under the same regulations and protocols that public schools receive from the governor and the mayor? How did charters and public schools operate differently during the pandemic?
Yeah, so because our charter is a state charter, we are still under Cuomo, but in terms of de Blasio, we have a little more flexibility. I think a really good example of that was when we originally closed. We closed weeks or a week earlier than public schools had decided to close. On top of that, another really good example is this week. So before de Blasio had decided right before Thanksgiving that he was going to shut down schools, we had already proactively made the decision that due to holiday travel and just large gatherings during this time of year, we were going to pause hybrid learning for these 3 weeks in between Thanksgiving and the New Year, just to prevent anybody from coming in that might have been at these gatherings or might have traveled, staff, students, anybody. And then that gives us time after the new year for everyone to get tested and come back and have a fresh start and resume hybrid learning.
Got it. So how has your experience been as a charter school teacher? How did you and your colleagues begin to transition with your students for remote learning? Were there any challenges?
So to start it off, I'm only a second year teacher, which means that last year was my first year, and in March of last year, they told us to go home. So I've never completed a full year as a teacher in the building. So going into a professional career, you always have these expectations, and then it kind of just blew up in all of our faces. And I think that being a teacher right now is just redefining what that means. So when they told us to go home on that day, it was definitely very scary and confusing. We didn't really have a plan. We only knew that we were going home and we didn't know when we were coming back. And I remember the day so vividly because the kids were there and we got a notification around lunchtime that we were going home. And not only were we going home, but we had to send the kids with 3 weeks worth of work. And any teacher will say they're prepared. We're prepared 2 weeks out. We know we're teaching in 2 weeks, but nobody's prepared for 3 weeks. So in like 2 hours, we had to put together all of the material to send home with our kids so that they had like hard copies. And it was just like such a team effort, and everyone was nervous with everything going on in the world, but also then having to put it all together. And if you've ever been in a school, the printers never work. So there was just like this need to get things done, but we did it and we sent it home, which also gave us the ability to just start right from where we had paused the next Monday. So within that Monday, we were continuing academics, we were continuing learning. We didn't miss a beat. There was no waiting around and deciding what we were going to do. Our leadership had a plan, and it just all happened so quickly. Those first couple of days were very stressful, but when we got through it and got a routine, it definitely it worked. So
Emma, how about the students? Did any of your students face challenges with lack of access to tech or internet? With everything happening with the disparities and tech equity, lack of tech equity in the Bronx and in Manhattan as well. How did the students find that to be challenging?
well, yeah, and I think that we all know that COVID itself has shed a light on a lot of these inequalities that, a lot of people didn't know about in the beginning. So right from the start, we knew that lots of our families needed tech. They not only needed tech, but they needed Wi-Fi. So right before we went home in March, surveys were sent out to our families, basically get an idea of how many computers we needed or how many Wi-Fi adapters we needed. So within those first couple of days of virtual learning, we gave out so many computers. I don't have the specific data, but I was fielding those emails, so I know it was a lot. And so that happened in the first wave. So we were sending out Chromebooks, we were sending out Wi-Fi enabled iPads. And then as COVID has sort of continued and this whole virtual world has expanded, it's not possible anymore for there to just be one computer in the house or two computers in the house. Now you need your 10-year-old to have a computer, your 6-year-old to have a computer, and sometimes even your 4-year-old to have a computer. So that's a lot of tech. So we have constantly been receiving orders, and as fast as we get them, we give them out. Sometimes it does take a couple weeks, but we try to get them out as soon as we're able to get them.
Are there any plans to reopen the physical locations of the academies anytime soon?
Yeah, so we have a reopening plan that's based on family collaboration, based on what our leadership deems appropriate, and based on just basic science. So within that, they created that reopening plan that we opened at the end of September as like our first trial of hybrid learning. And we opened, which is very similar to public schools in this hybrid model. And basically what the hybrid model is it's in cohorts. So we split each class into two, and the cohorts come in on certain days. So cohort A will come in on Monday and Wednesdays, and cohort B will come in on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And then when they're not in there at home and on Fridays, everyone is at home. And of course, which was probably predictable, not some kids also opted to stay virtual all the time. So our cohorts got really small to the point where I had at most 9 kids in my class, which if I had to take away one benefit from this whole entire situation is the ability to have a class size of 9 kids. I always think that like schooling should have that size because it just allows you to have more one-on-one time with kids, differentiate learning to fit the needs of the scholars actually in your room, because having any more than that, you can't really individualize learning like that. So if I could say any of the benefits, it would have been that.
That's the silver lining of this entire situation.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask also, I'm glad that you mentioned, I'm super interested in learning about the curriculum and the anti-racism and abolitionist work that the school is also teaching students. Can you tell me about some of the lesson plans that the kids have received throughout this school year, especially with everything going on with COVID-19, all the protests that are happening, Black Lives Matter movements?
Yeah, so we've actually been doing a lot. If you walked into my classroom, all of the kids can tell you their opinions on what's happening in the world. A big thing is right from the beginning, we created these blocks for social emotional learning that always had, with first grade in general, you always do like the kindness and the community building. But right now, that is just so much more important to have like a home place. And our school has a really big emphasis on this home place as some place where you can not only feel comfortable coming to, but you can also feel comfortable being yourself in. So that's been a huge part. We've done a lot of activities with identity. We've done a lot of activities with the election. The kids really got to understand what the Electoral College was and how that was working. We talked a lot about when the election wasn't actually over yet and what that means, that all votes need to be counted and everyone's voice need to be heard. We talked a lot about voting rights and how, it may be a right, but people had to fight for it. And it hasn't always been a woman can vote or a Black person can vote. It's really that that had to be fought for. So we talked a lot about leaders of those movements. The kids get really into it and they love sharing their opinion and having discussions with each other because they all come from different backgrounds and they hear what their families talk about. So they bring that into the classroom. And it's just a really great way to express their feelings and learn from each other, and also just learn how to ask questions and get into debates with each other about things that they feel very passionately about. So
I
you just
love
have a
it.
bunch of 6-year-olds just kind of going back and forth, and it's great.
I was just about to ask you, how old are the kids? 6 years old. Wow.
Yeah, 5 and 6. Yeah. But they are just so interested and curious, and they're just like sponges sucking up the world around them. So I feel the best thing that we can do as educators is give them a space to ask those questions and challenge those norms that, I don't know about you, but I never had that opportunity as a kid to do. It was always like, this is the academics, this is the curriculum, you're just going to learn this. Whereas now we want them to be just as much a part in their academic as we are as their teachers.
Yep, I had the same experience. There was no place for a kid to, give an opinion or raise their hand when it comes to this type of thing. It was just like,
Yeah.
this is the rhetoric you have to, understand, and like, you're a kid, stay in your place. So I love that that's happening, and the future is bright as East Harlem scholars. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
Emma, before we go, how can families find out more about the school, and just any numbers or websites that you can provide at this time?
Yeah. So we definitely have an Instagram. It's EHTP NYC. So you can check that out for all of the information on open houses and things like that. And we also have a website. So eastharlemscholars.org has all of the information about our policies, our charter, our anti-racist practices, all of that stuff is on there as well. Yeah, so that's all the places you can reach us.
Thank you so much, Emma, for your time today. Thanks for joining us.
Of course.
Emma Sprecher is a teacher over at East Harlem Scholars Academy II, and you can learn more about the schools visiting them online at eastharlemscholars.org. We'll be right back.